The ATX DAO podcast is brought to you by our friends at Tequila 512. Looking for a way to decentralize your happy hour? They got you covered. Welcome to the ATX DAO podcast, the hub for exploring the forefront of blockchain technology in Austin's Web3 community. We connect you with innovators within ATX DAO and beyond as we venture into the world of decentralized technology. So crack open a beer and join us for a front row seat to learn about the innovations and trends shaping our digital future. This is the ATX DAO podcast. Well, welcome to the ATX DAO podcast. We are excited to welcome Nirav Murthy with us. Nirav, welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you with us. You're doing some exciting stuff with Camp Network and looking forward to digging into that with you. But first off, just welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Really glad to be here. A huge fan of the podcast, and gonna be looking more forward to tell you about Camp.
Yeah, just jump right in, man. Tell us about Camp.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So at Camp Network, we're building the autonomous IP layer. Now, what does that really mean? Our belief is pretty simple. Using Camp, users can tokenize and register their IP on chain, train and deploy agents around it, and then lease out these agents for broader community usage, all while handling payments distributed through the blockchain completely. Our belief is simple. In a world, we're seeing AI take over more and more everyday aspects of our life. And our belief is in about the next 10 years, 95% of all IP generated will be done through AI. And in a world where that matters, the most important thing is provenance. How do you prove that you're the actual creator of something? The Weeknd and Drake made a song, or did they? Nobody really knows, and nobody really saw any of it, but it went on Spotify, made a ton of money. The Weeknd and Drake never saw any money out of that at the end of the day. It's not going to be like an anomaly in the future. That's going to be the norm. And in a world where that's the norm, provenance and proving that you're the creator of something matters significantly more than everything else. The other side of this that we really see is you look at all these agent companies profiting off of things like Reddit, Spotify for training data. Those only have value at the end of the day because of the communities that already live within that. So why is it that none of those users ever actually get paid for any of those types of modeling situations? And that's what we really believe Camp is. Camp long-term becomes the world's greatest user-owned IP repository, which also doubles as the greatest data sampling marketplace in the world for the future of AI.
No, that's awesome. So kind of walk me through that a little bit more. So what is that? Let's say I have some IP. Let's say I recorded a song. How do I connect that with Camp?
Super good question. And there's multiple ways to do so. So our belief is as an industry, we're kind of screwed if we don't have like the application layer take off. Our belief is like the form factor by which anybody does anything is applications. Quick example, nobody ever takes a photo and then like sticks it on their AWS locker. Everybody does it on like Instagram and then broader term it stores towards the infrastructure provider. So granted, we do have the option where somebody could upload like an MP3 file and put terms and conditions such as if you use this, it's like a 10% royalty fee or anything around that. But what we see more common as an experience on this is we have a streaming team, say Hitmaker, for example, which is one of our decentralized streaming teams. Somebody uploads a song towards Hitmaker, and then it's stored as an actual piece of IP on chain. And on that storage piece, through what we call Origin, which is our developer SDK and the easiest way to register IP on chain, you set the terms and conditions around which anybody else can use that. Let's say I'm creating a movie trailer and publishing it to Rewarded TV, which is like a tokenized IP for a video team that we have building on top of our blockchain. And you want to use that song in that video. Now I basically say, okay, I'm going to pay this person 10% of the royalties that I make on this because they're providing the song to it. And we handle all of that ultimate payment distribution flow and microtransactions through the blockchain because that's fundamentally what we see as the best case of it that exists today.
Very cool. So there's a company that I use for like some of our audio stuff. So like music licensing, stuff like that. It's actually called Audio. They're based out of Nashville. And so with
very original name to say the very least.
So they added two I's.
Yeah.
So it was original in that sense.
Okay, there you go. AI.
Right. But they, so one of the things, the way that works for them is, so it's kind of traditional model. So it's definitely Web 2. So they have a repository of songs that are out there available for you. You can have a membership, and then you have to download a piece of paper that I have to keep in my drive, like for the rest of time, to know that I have the right to use this licensed music. So tell me, like, how do y'all improve on that process with the blockchain? Because I think that's
I mean, IP management is a really, really antiquated industry if you think about it. Like, in order to negotiate those deals, it's called sync a lot of these times, or like licensing, in other words. Not only you take music, for example, as you mentioned, you're negotiating with the labels, you're negotiating with the catalog, you're negotiating with the writers, you're negotiating with the producers, the agents, and the managers. And by the time you have enough understanding of the parties, somebody's like, we don't really want to do this deal anymore and whatnot. It is extremely complex. It is very legally costly because it's all done via pen and paper and like corporate lawyers. And number three is it's slow, like very, very, very slow. Blockchain represents a really unique case. People try and over like fancy and complicate what blockchain actually is at its core, it's just a ledger. It's a record of all transactions. And so if I can store that I created this piece of music, and in order for anybody else to actually use it, here are the certain terms required codified into a smart contract, that process becomes that much easier. Let's say you're trying to use some opening of like the Jeopardy music on this podcast or something like that. The composer of that would put that on chain, and then you guys at ATX Stat would sort of say, okay, we want to use this for the podcast. We're going to pay him 1% of royalties for this, or we're going to pay him like a one-time licensing fee of $100. The actual mechanics of how you do it matter up to you and the person who actually owns the IP in the first place. But we're able to codify that all via smart contracts and really streamline that process, as opposed to having to go back and forth 100 times with different lawyers and trying to figure out what's the exact percentage to do so. Here, it's so much easier, and you're saving so much time at the end of the day through this.
So, quick question. So you mentioned the application layer has to be super successful in order for this backend infrastructure layer to work. It seems like for me, you guys are building like a payments processing network that's built towards IP allocation itself, right? Like you're basically breaking down the fees of all the parties that are involved and issuing the payments for all these assets that are there itself once the creator puts it on there. For something like music or something like video, audio, whatever it is, that creator content that goes on there. The question then is like, well, like, okay, so a very simple thing is like we were talking about this in the DAO recap thing. Last cycle, a lot of people were trying to build like music streaming apps, right? These music streaming apps were absolutely terrible. Like you couldn't even use them. You could not use them on your phone. You'd have to only use them on your desktop. Like my question is like, do you think that some of the application layer stuff that's plugged into Camp would be ubiquitous across any of the existing devices that are there in a traditional home today? Like your TV, like could we be able to play music on your TV or your Sonos or anything like that, or connect to these things? Like, how much do you think of it is like, hey, this content has to be accessible anywhere and everywhere? Not only should it be creator incentivized, but it should be also like incentivized in terms of distribution of like allowing you to access this content.
Yeah, really good question. And I'll even answer like before I respond to your question exactly, I'll almost sort of caveat with like the premise of that question as well. I wouldn't say we're like a payment processor. That's not necessarily what we do. I would say that blockchain represents a unique way to handle transactions at a micro level scale, more so than like us just being like a Stripe competitor at the end of the day. We're an infrastructure provider that's specifically optimized and purpose built for all things related to IP. The other thing, really quickly to hit on, not to go down this like creator economy route just per se, is everything is IP at the end of the day. Like we're using music, photos, images, videos is one example. But a really big aspect that we haven't talked about is data. Like everything that I do, my Yelp reviews, like if I'm writing about a certain restaurant, if I'm writing my own tweets and whatnot, that's all IP at the end of the day. And so we're seeing a lot of spectrums just outside of like the traditional sense of the word creator economy that we're seeing a lot of use cases around. Now I can have my own Twitter agent that basically works as if I'm a marketer. Let's say I'm a god at Twitter. Everybody wants to use that. I can basically train an agent based off my Twitter data, like lease it out such that anybody else can use it for $10 a month, and then I get 1% of it or 10% of it, whatever I set those establishments are, because developing my own agent also becomes its IP. So just want to make sure that we're thinking, when we think about IP in the first place, it's a much broader definition than just all things related to creator economy. To answer your second question, yes, like the answer is categorically yes. Right now, if you look at the way that blockchain communities are really existing today, they're largely like very esoteric in that like they appeal to a very niche, probably 100,000 to 250,000 users in the world who are like very capable of trading, which like, let's be honest, the blockchain UX kind of sucks when it comes to like making something available for the masses. You look at one of these like purpose protocols and everybody's like, holy cow, look at these charts. I don't even know where to look. And then you compare that to like Robinhood, where it's like, I would like to search this and I would like to buy this pretty instantly. And so we're like UX maxes at the end of the day. And so as part of that, what you mentioned is everything can't just be optimized for like desktop web. Most of the people do things on their phones more so than desktops. In fact, if everybody could only work from their phones, gun to my head, I think everybody would rather do that as opposed to sort of sit around on their laptop all day. They'd go spend time like walking around and doing calls if that's possible. We believe that the future of the world is all about UX adoption. And insofar as that's true, that has to be things related to mobile as well as meeting people where they already are is the broader thing. If you're trying to force new user behavior, you're pushing a boulder uphill. It is very, very, very difficult to do in the first place. The benefit of what we believe we're doing is meeting users where they already are on habits that they're already familiar with. Oh, you listen to music? Why don't you get paid to do so? Or why don't you get comped to do so if you're basically creating a playlist around yourself? Now you can have agents basically tokenize that playlist, and now you can say, make me a playlist with similar to this with whatnot, and then enable that for the public. And if somebody pays $1 for that, you get a cent. But that's doing things that users are already familiar with. Similarly, on like the example you gave about TVs, all the applications that sort of work with Camp, we're about 60 native teams today. I can give you like the 500 application numbers that everybody always likes to show, that really big number. Like, let's be honest, that's like the 111th fork of some other app that already exists today. We really care about like our native dApps at the end. And so of those, I would say that 75% of them are in what I call the Web 2.5 category, which means they're trying to cater to mass audiences. And that's through a combination of mobile, like App Store, iOS, as well as Play Store, as well as desktop native, as well as desktop web. And so what we're seeing is complete continuity across the entire stack, as opposed to just one app being on one desktop website catering to like 50K people at the end of the day. Otherwise, this business completely, not Camp, like the broader blockchain business completely falls apart if we're never actually going to appeal to the masses. And it's the same, call it 100,000 users are transacting over and over and farming new L1s over time.
Fair. Yeah. You don't want to recycle users. You want to grow the pie, and growing the pie means that you have to meet users where they are. I agree 100%. Like, that's ultimately what consumer crypto adoption really should be. And creating a data layer incentives for that makes a lot of sense. I got to ask then, like, talk me through a monetization scheme then. Like, you mentioned a lot of data examples here. What kind of data is there? How does monetization work for this? Pick any of the umpteen examples that you talked about.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, like, I'm sure when you talk to a lot of these blockchain businesses, they always just like shill you on things like network fees and like gas fees and like MEV and whatnot, which is like great. That's like a lot of financial and math wizardry that comes about only on tokens. But like the funny irony of blockchain is none of these companies actually make money, right? Because there's no real revenue associated with it. And so I think Camp is in a unique place to actually benefit off of that. You look at what like the long-term goal of Camp is, and it's really this IP repository. You have users come in at the top of the funnel through the application layer. The application layer is creating new IP, creating all this new type of stuff. Users are earning from that. We have a validator or ZK proofs in the future attest that this is all done correctly. And now you have this really interesting set of data. Now, the really interesting part of this is there's a massive demand of agents, or like what I should say, models, looking to train their models on new and like verified IP. Why? How can you tell this exists? Like, look at Grass. Grass has done a lot of good work around getting video content. Now there's a huge demand of people looking to buy it. When you look at the AI wars, there's three different armies. There's model, there's compute, and there's IP. Model, like DeepSeek R1, has proven that the model layer is very difficult to monetize. Frankly, it's being commoditized in real time. When you look at like compute, I mean, NVIDIA is like bigger than the entire crypto market cap combined. So like you can prove that there's some degree of centralization that's beneficiary to that. And then if you look at it, the only value accrual layer of the AI war is because the only way to actually distinguish which agents are better than others is the quality of IP that you're training on. And so where Camp revenue model makes sense longer term is as we see more and more of these agents come on board, we expect to see user-specific agents as well as task-specific agents. And the only way to train those two types of models are on user-owned IP in the first place. And so if you have a user, let's say like Luke or Ash is creating a restaurant bot for Austin, what they're going to do is see who's published a ton of reviews about restaurants in Austin, whether it's through like a Plato, which is our version of like an on-chain Yelp, or through anything. And then fundamentally, if they're paying for that data, Camp takes a cut on that. And so effectively you have similar to like an eBay marketplace model, except instead of for goods, it's for data, which is longer term where we see a huge revenue potential as well.
Interesting. I gotta also ask so if you're a big UX maxi, where is the asymmetric or arbitrage opportunity around onboarding into Camp and your apps in there?
It's such a good question. Yeah, I think if you look at a lot of blockchains, they've gotten really like cutesy is probably the right word about like permissionless or like decentralization. And I think if you look at like the growth of what we call two of the biggest ecosystems over the last call it 2 to 3 years between Ethereum and Solana, and how Solana has attracted so many more developers and how Ethereum has sort of fallen off in price, I think you can see that one of them is better than the other. And a large portion of that is like candidly because they king made certain shit, or as opposed to just sort of being like, let's support everybody left, right, and central. And that's kind of the approach that we take at Camp as well. Instead of having like 900 different wallets, we have one wallet, which is an embedded wallet. You can see all your apps within there. You can see all your tokens, all your currencies, and all your NFTs. Why have 900 different apps that don't talk to each other in very real time as opposed to one app? As opposed to one wallet. Similarly on that piece, Like on-ramps. On-ramps suck today. Like, let's be honest, right? Why do you have like 11 different on-ramps? Then you have to figure out which is the cheapest fees, which is the best geographic coverage. We work with one on-ramp aggregator. Sure, we bear the bulk of the fees, but if that means that I don't have to like throw my phone against the wall by trying to buy $10 worth of Ethereum, I'm taking those numbers any day of the week in order to abstract that away. Instead of having this really big choice and like supporting everybody, if you look at what Solana did really well, it really aligned itself with Phantom and like basically said, hey, if you want to build on Solana, use the Phantom wallet. And we believe in kind of the same thesis where the arbitrage opportunity is instead of having to figure out how to send like instead like $40 of base ETH to X, Y, and Z currency in order to purchase this NFT. Fuck that. It's basically here's the one wallet you on ramp to. Here's the level of on ramp aggregator if you need to go from fiat to whatever, or fiat to whatever token you want to go to. And then even a layer below, we actually have a chain abstraction partner that we're partnering with directly, where it's like, let's say I have liquidity on Solana and I needed to go over to Camp, we can enable that as well. And that's where I think the huge arbitrage opportunity is because nobody who ever has interacted with blockchain should be able to log on and buy an NFT or do anything on Camp without having to figure out how to get $100 of ETH in their wallet in the first place.
Pretty thorough, like an on-ramp kind of like synchronized point. It seems like a lot of your thing is like when you think about UX arbitrage, like deployment for Camp and building out this ecosystem, revolves around like simplicity, right? Kind of like, like the Starbucks thing is like you go in and you have 500 different fucking cups of coffee. I just wanted a fucking cup of coffee, like I just wanted a
Exactly.
coffee.
Yeah.
That would have been easier for me. I can add all the other frivolous shit on top of it if I want to, including the diabetes $10,000 like mocha cup shit like that they want to fucking put on.
Yeah.
By the way, it's NSFW on this pod. You can say whatever you want. Don't worry.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I'm glad.
Yeah, I swear like a dirty
Yeah, I
Italian
kind of hit a little
hooker.
F-bomb and I was like, whoops, I might be on that one.
No,
But
you're
yeah,
good.
you're
You're
good.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like the simplicity aspect is kind of key. And I like this. I like the idea that you've said, hey, if users really have to express an avenue of like they want a different wallet solution or they want different on-ramps, okay, fine. Someone else can build it and validate that thesis. But at least for us to like further the mission on Camp, it makes sense to have this one beachhead around simplicity that we just go on.
Yeah, like I'll give you a really similar example. I was on a panel in Dubai like 10 days ago, and somebody was like, what's your goal of crypto for the future? And I watched all these people go around and say like 10 million users, 10 million net new users, seeing the first bank actually doing like credit and debt on chain. And I'm like, dude, if I hear people say that 5 apps work, that will be a huge win in my books. Because like, look, for most people who are DeFi native or like crypto native in the first place, they use like Uniswap, Aave, and then like whatever the new hot app is that's either in perps or lending in order to farm for the airdrop. But the minute that falls away, nobody fucking cares, and they all go back to the original one because it works. It's tried and true and tested. On the consumer side of things, like the best app that I think that exists today by a mile is Blackbird, because like I tap my shit or whatever it is, and somebody's like, okay, cool, you're checked in. Like it works at the end of the day. And so our thesis is like, why are we building another infrastructure play for the same 100,000 users as opposed to like expand the pie? It's almost the same on the developer side of things, right? Like we go to this crypto conferences over the world, and it's like the same 10,000 people who we see at every single conference, and we're all like, all the infra plays are basically just fighting or like circle jerking over the same 100 developers who have actually built products that actually matter. Whereas if you like look at it on the Web2 side of things and you expand the funnel, it's like, holy cow, there's 1,000 apps in Web2 that are phenomenal with a ton of eyeballs that have not found great ways to monetize yet. And like that's what blockchain really represents with a unique way to do so. But in order for those apps to actually come on chain in the first place, they need to see really strong DevX, which means like actually tools around it, like embedded wallets that people want to use, and UX, which means that it doesn't take a massive amount of education for a user to actually log on and have a totally similar experience to what they had on Web2 without anything else.
So I guess that's the perfect transition into why builders should come build on Camp, right? Like what do you do to make it easier for a dev to be like, yo, let's come build over there? Like, why should Luke come build there? I mean, he's an ex TradFi bro, and like, he's dipping his toes now into AVAX. Like, what's your pitch to him as a dev to be like, yo, come build over here?
Yeah, it's a good question, Luke. Also, for what it's worth, I'm also a TradFi guy.
Nice.
Also, like, by the way, I'm a huge AVAX shiller, so like,
Love it.
I'm never gonna fade another ecosystem as well. I think, look, I think at Camp you need to, and like, let's call it broader, like ecosystem block space is how I'll call it. You need to sort of silo or like segment the commercial benefits of building somewhere and then the technical benefits of building somewhere. So if we start on the commercial side of things, everybody thinks it's like whoever gives me $1 million, I'll build there. that is like the most 2022 heinous way of thinking possible, because all that happens is those teams are going to grant farm you for like 50 to $150,000, and then they're going to rinse and repeat that playbook with other people who are extremely desperate for developers. And so that product they don't even need to build, because between 10 different ecosystems they can get $1.5 million and then buy a house in Cabo and never have to work again. Like if you're trying to still buy teams, it's never the way to go, because candidly those teams are never going to deploy on you in the first place. I think what really makes a difference on the commercial side is, number one, being able to make introductions. I know that sounds so basic, but it's like extremely complex. Being able to recognize a business and say like, oh, here are the 4 to 5 things that you need. On your DevX partner, you need like Third Web. On your wallet partner, here's who you should work with because they also work with these guys, and there's a bunch of synergies that you can run around there. You know, on your customer side, have you chatted with this team? They could be really interesting because they do a lot in media. You guys do something in music. You guys could cross over and release your own music videos on their platform as well. That's the first thing that really works. The second is like BD. I know it sounds even dumber, but like there's a certain joy for having these projects get like ping a question and then having somebody respond within like 20 minutes or like 2 hours. I think when I was joining, you guys were talking about this, but like the nature of Telegram is so instantaneous because of how global blockchain is as a business. But like there's a rule at camp. If there's a chat that goes unturned from an ecosystem or prospective ecosystem team for 24 hours and you're the point of person on it, you have to pay a fine of $100. And trust me, a lot of holiday parties have been funded by those levels of fines over time. And so like that's something that we think is really important. And I think the third is like time with founders is weirdly underrated. Like I love working with these early stage teams because it's like, oh hey, the way you're positioning this is this, but like if you want to raise money, I think here's how you could potentially position it. And I think they would view this as like a trading comp to something like this, and they'd probably potentially push you up higher on the valuation or actually get over the deal. And those are the types of things that make like early stage founders really want to work with you, because it's more so instead of like, oh, here's like a $10,000, it's like, here, let me help you go raise $100,000, because that's going to give you so much more confidence on your own as opposed to just grant farming me for $10,000. That's what I'd say on the commercial side. On the technical side of things, one of the things that we've done is we've customized our execution layer to be completely focused on all things related to IP and AI. And you can even like bucket those two categories candidly under like the broader umbrella of consumer crypto in the first place. But you look at the way that like 99% of block space is done in the world, and like how the way that validators sort of treat blocks, they're always going to do what yields the highest MEV. And whatever yields the highest MEV is 99.9 recurring percent of the time going to be DeFi related. Which means if you're building like consumer IP or AI in the first place, you're never going to feel validated, no pun intended. But you're like really never going to be prioritized actually, because somebody's always going to be front running you because of whatever DeFi transaction is going to yield higher MEV. So in that sense, it sucks for you because that's why your users experience high latency, and that's why they usually turn off the platform pretty quickly. Camp reverses that notion on a whimsical. Like that's why our DeFi ecosystem, we have like one app that we consider our DeFi super app. It has lending, perps, DEX, spot, and it has stablecoin like yield on top of all of it. Because the premise is everybody wants to do other things attached to it. And so if you're building in consumer, we give you the best DevX because your users experience the lowest latency possible. Similarly, what we did with our good friends over at Gelato actually is the biggest KPI. We talk with our customers a lot, our teams a lot. And again, the thing that they can really care about is like a user clicking something and then something happening pretty instantaneously, as opposed to waiting for like 6 seconds of that like big circle at the end of the day. And so with our good friends over there, any app that's building on top of us that wants to spin out and basically get its own block space, which we call side camps as of right now, Gelato will spin that up for them. And the whole reason why that's great is because then they get their own execution environments, their own dedicated app block space, keep their own sequencing as well, and their users don't have to be congested against anything else that's driving serious traffic on chain in the first place.
Okay.
Very cool. So just a kind of a question in terms of how Camp works, right? So you all your own blockchain. So if I build on other chains, like let's say I use Solana, Avalanche, whatever else, are they able to interoperate with y'all for the IP, or do they need to actually move their operations over to Camp?
Yeah, good question. I mean, you have to register some degree on Camp as well. Like, if everything is on Solana and it's just like, hey, we're Camp now, like, we want to do something with you guys, it won't work. But we're not like one of those teams that makes you deploy on us at the end of the day. Like, trying to force teams to do exclusivity is like horrible. It's like trying to trap somebody into dating you, which always lends into like divorce at the end of the day. I think we all know that way too well. But like, the bigger thing is, as long as some smart contracts are deployed on Camp, we don't care if their tokens live elsewhere. We're like currently one of our eco teams is about to launch a token on Ethereum. They were like, "Do you want us to wait till mainnet for Camp?" Is that we're like, "No, there's more liquidity on Ethereum. Like, you should do it on Ethereum, but all their contracts live on Camp because they want to handle all their royalties through their IP through Camp as well."
Cool. That makes sense. Now, in terms of just kind of going back to the user side of things, so you mentioned kind of how folks are like creating the IP themselves, whether it's data, whether it's images, whether it's music, whatever it might be. So talk us through kind of what that experience is like a little bit as well. So I shoot this awesome video. I think people might want to use it as like stock imagery or things like that. How do I monetize that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And like, look, we're in the early stage of this, but I'll walk you through some examples that hopefully are interesting. So let's take a team like Hitmaker, which is like a decentralized streaming platform. You could think about it as like Audius 2.0, I guess you could call it. But I'm an artist. I register a song on Audius or whatever on Hitmaker, right? And then I say like, boom, I'm gonna price this at $1, but everybody gets tokenized streams of it, royalties, whatnot, capital formation. Then now let's say like my roommate is pretty interested in like remixing. We have a team called Hume. Hume enables you to like use AI to remix, or you can create music in the certain style of somebody, or you can take existing music and then turn it into the style of somebody. So that can mean like turn this Aretha Franklin song into like a Beatles like pop 60s song and whatnot. Now somebody remixes it, they put their terms and conditions on it, and then they re-release it on Hitmaker. Now, if somebody were to pay for that piece on Hitmaker, not only would the remixer get paid, but the original IP rights holder would get paid as well. That's really the key that we think about on the royalty distribution. We're seeing the same thing with like books, believe it or not. Like we have a team called Novel, which is similar to like Wattpad, if you guys are familiar with that business, which is like it's basically like a UGC platform for fiction-based content. Started off as mostly fan fiction, but then in addition to that, we have a team called Storychain, where you can write books in any artist capacity. So imagine I take 3 short stories of what Luke had written as his first sort of set of chapters, and then now I'm like turn the next 3 chapters in the style of J.R.R. Tolkien, and then I re-release that. Those are all ways that we envision creators getting paid in the first place. The other thing we see on the data side of things is largely around the AI thing that I mentioned earlier, where it's like we see a lot of these modeling companies looking for more and more new verified sources of IP, similar to what happened to the streaming wars in the 2010s, which I can get into. But it's created this massive, massive demand, which obviously spikes price for all things related to uniquely owned IP in the first place.
Yeah, I think the AI agent is definitely a big opportunity too, right? Because you have, like you
Yeah.
said, you have some economies with that already. So like ChatGPT, you can train a custom GPT. People can monetize that, I believe, on there as well. But then even like if somebody developed a really good trading bot, right? Like that would be something that folks would be financially incentivized to want to license and be able to use themselves. So if you could do that, I think it'd be huge.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned the trading bot thing. We've actually gone down this rabbit hole a decent amount. So the first part you said about GPT, yeah, I mean, there's been like proven demand to pay for GPT. GPT went from paying like charging $20 a month to like $200 a month, and like yeah, there was some churn, but it wasn't 90% churn, which means the revenue still goes up into the right over time. The trading bot thing is really interesting because let's say like I'm a god tier trader, like Ansom's one of the best traders, obviously. He probably never wants to publish an Ansom bot because then if everybody was using the Ansom bot, then his alpha effectively actually becomes zero because it means everybody has the same trading strategy over time. But we're starting to see people try and do this in different ways. Like AIXBit kind of showed what's AIXBT kind of shows what's possible with like this Bloomberg style like news updates and whatnot, which is not necessarily a trading bot, but it's an information bot for trading, if that makes sense. You can see the little nuance of a difference there. But it proves that there's clearly a demand for people to want to say, like, hey, I want to earn 6% yield, bigger exposure to bonds than for equities. Go take like 10,000 bucks from my wallet to do so. And that's where we think the trading bot becomes really into play. You know, you've seen this with things like Wealthfront and Betterment on the robo trader side, but now the UX of being able to do it directly to an agent and the benefit of having it be through a wallet through which you're the only signer, that becomes a much more realistic reality.
So obviously building out camp and then you coming to this thesis of like, and then going to want to do this mission is kind of unique, right? Most people just kind of do the copy pasta thing, but like this is clearly not a copy pasta. I'm curious to hear like, how did you come to this thesis? How do you come to this realization and was like, okay, we have to solve this problem.
Yeah, look, first of all, like very much appreciated. Like, you know, copy pastas are the norm in blockchain. Call us crazy. We want to do something else. Whoa, like somebody get me into the psych ward or something. Yeah, so a quick background on myself and the founding team. So James Chi, my co-founder, was at Goldman Sachs, and then he was at Figma, where he sort of worked with a lot of these self-serve businesses, helping scale software. Rahul D, who's our founding engineer and CTO, actually, he was actually the founder of an Intense platform before it was like cool to build Intense. You know, that classic case of you built something like too ahead of its time, so nobody wants to fund it, and then like 1 year later it's like 10 on 500 million or something like that in a fundraise. And then before that he actually ran like a staking team at Coinlist, and then before that he was doing a lot around like health data and how to actually like source that in an effective way. And my background is I was an investor and investment banker, specifically for media, gaming, entertainment, sports, and music, so a lot of IP stuff there. In 2022 I actually saw this happen firsthand. I don't know if you guys remember this, but the Writers Guild of America went on strike because they're like, AI is taking over our jobs, which was like kind of accurate and weird that they would strike about that because then they were just like, okay, we'll just use AI to do your jobs. And then they sort of figured out a way in which it's like, okay, wait, we'll prompt AI, but like we'll include it in all our life and whatnot. But, it sort of like got me thinking about this idea of provenance in the first place. And like what we were actually building in 2023 was this idea of like the creator economy on chain. 90% of your revenue comes from 10% of your fans. And so the whole premise was how do we use blockchains and NFTs in order through the self-sovereignty of data in order to figure out who your biggest fans really are. We actually like did some pretty cool launches. If you guys listen to 2000s hip hop, crazy reference, we did like a fan engagement program with Sean Paul, like Temperature Sean Paul, which is like the one song everybody knows by him, but largely around this exact premise. But what we found is like we were basically becoming resellers of data. We were going to folks and saying like some folks on Ethereum, some folks on Polygon, some folks on Sui, some folks on Solana, and being like, hey, do you need all this music data? We can provide it to you. And then we're like, wait a second, we're just consultants of data at this point. This is not that interesting. And so what we realized is we needed our own block space. And then around the same time, what we saw was after we launched our L2 originally, was everybody started to like get really into agents, but we saw them all as being like general purpose agents, i.e., like instead of using Google search, people were using ChatGPT to ask it like, well, what's the best hotel to stay at in Cabo or something like that. And so around that time, what we really sort of looked at the map, we took like a broader picture back and said like, okay, clearly the future of the world is agent to agent interactions. In a world where agent to agent interactions exist, you need user specific agents and task specific agents. And the only way to train that is on user owned data. And we were doing a lot around bringing this Web2 user owned data on chain in the first place. And then I think the bigger bet that we made is instead of framing it as like a data layer or anything like that, we realized that everything in the world that you do is related to IP. Like my photos, if you guys and I were to get a beer and then like take a photo of us at the beer spot, that's my IP at the end of the day as well. And so if everything in the world is positioned as IP, we need to sort of break it down into what are the blocks of everything of the future, and it's all personal IP. And that's actually the way that we realize instead of just building this as a layer two, we need to decentralize and become a layer one. Because ultimately, a lot of what we needed to do was customize the execution layer in order to have people actually want to build on top of us. Because otherwise, we just become more DeFi block space. And at that point, you're sort of like a revolving door worth of chains that everybody's just hopping to from one to the next. And so, sort of the premise that we're taking is, this is here to stay. Like we long-term believe Camp will be the greatest IP repository because not only are we bringing data from Web 2, we're also having some of these teams create new IP on chain in the first place and seeing what users actually do on chain as well. And that's why we believe we're really well equipped to do that.
That's pretty solid. I know we're hitting up on time here, so I gotta ask, like, so if anyone of our audience or anyone else, like devs, teams, anyone who's just like interested in even thinking about the IP economy and like really building out on this thesis that you have, how do they get a hold of you?
Twitter or Telegram. I'm at NMURTH on Telegram. I'm not one of those weirdos who has like 18 telegrams. I swear that's mine. I respond addicted amount. My Twitter is Nirav.Murthy. Our team Twitter is Camp Network XYZ. Please keep pinging them because we need a new budget for the Christmas party this year. So the more fines that we can rack up, the better. But no, we're really excited. We like to chat with everybody on the developer ecosystem side. If you're a developer and you don't know what you want to build yet, but you want to do something, we also keep like a list of ideas that we think would be super helpful to do. We work pretty closely with our partners. We want our team to be an extension of yours. We work with a ton of solo developers who are like, I don't know how to do marketing. We sort of will fund the first few months of marketing, whether it's hiring you like an intern or having our team sort of do a lot of that community work for you. But that's what we're most excited by and really look forward to chatting with everybody, whether you're a dev, whether you're somebody who's interested in the world, whether you're somebody who's a creator. We like to chat with everybody.
It's awesome, man.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so I did have one other question. So if we have any listeners that want to use some of the IP that's out there, right? So maybe not on the creator side, but let's say I want to be able to consume the IP. How do I get access to doing that? Is that accessible on your website, or how do they do that?
Really cool question. Today's a pretty exciting day. We launched testnet about like an hour ago. We call it as part of our, thank you. It's been a long day, but we call it as part of our Summit series. Obviously, I'm branding with like the camp theme, but we call it Summit series because I think we're one of the few few ecosystems that has like more than 10 dApps live on testnet from day one. And only one of those is a DeFi app. Everything else is largely around like IP generation via AI or like IP consumption via AI as well. And we'll consistently be adding apps to that over the next, call it 5 to 6 weeks of this incentivized testnet campaign that we're running. You'll already see a lot of those on chain, but first of all, like if you want to use any of those apps, again, my DMs are open or you can find those all online at our website. And second is you'll be able to sort of remix it and we're handling all of that on chain right now as well via testnet. So very, very, very cool to see all of the IPs natively within the apps. we're actually going to be having our first comic book come on by the end of this month as well, which is all going to be a combination of one guy's IP that he did a long time ago, and then working with the team I mentioned earlier, but Mervin Story Chain, to actually create a story around that all as well. So you can sort of see, not only does this help the original IP creators, but here's how in a world where IP creators and AGI that creates IP can be used together to create an even better.
Awesome, man.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Dude, thanks for coming on here. I know we were playing a little telephone game of like getting things synced, but I really appreciate you coming on here, man, and sharing the story. It is definitely unique. Yeah, I will say this is a unique thesis and go to market in a whole different sector that you're tackling.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate the time, and it was a blast to do this.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nirav.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the ATX DAO podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. To learn more about ATX DAO, visit us at atxdao.com and follow us on X, Farcaster, and LinkedIn at ATX DAO. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.